Maine. A 9-year-old girl walked into the most dangerous man in Montreal's private office, set a crumpled envelope on his desk and said, "My mother told me you would know what this means." Kaspar Veld did not look up from his papers. He had built his silence over 20 years. Men twice her size had walked into this office and lost the ability to speak. The air in here had weight to it. Dark wood, low light, the smell of cold leather, and something older underneath. His associates said the room itself knew how to make a person feel small. The girl did not feel small. She stood in front of his desk in a yellow raincoat with a broken zipper, hair still damp from outside, one shoe untied, and she waited with the particular patience of a child who had learned that rushing adults was useless. Kaspar finally looked up. She had dark eyes, steady ones, the kind that had already seen enough to stop flinching at silence. He looked at the envelope. His name was written on the front in handwriting he had not seen in 9 years. The letters pressed deep into the paper, like the pen had been held by someone who wrote with intention, not habit. He did not touch it. "What is your name?" he said, not a question. The way men like him spoke, statements that happened to require answers. "Phoebe," she said. "Phoebe Calloway, Calloway." The name moved through him like a fist through old plaster. Quiet going in, damage after. He had not allowed that name in this office. Not in 9 years. Men learned fast which words cost them. And Simone Calloway had become one of those words the year she left Montreal, without explanation, without argument, without leaving a single trace he could follow that did not eventually go cold. Kaspar looked at the child again. The jaw, stubborn, the way she held herself, chin uply, not with arrogance, but with the effort of someone keeping their composure by force of will. Simone had stood exactly like that the first night they met, in a hospital corridor in Pointe St. Charles, when one of his men had been brought in with a knife wound and a useless alias, and she had looked at Kaspar, then a stranger, and said, "I don't care who he is. I care that he lied on his intake form, and that is going to cause a problem for everyone in this room." He had stayed. He should have left. He always should have left. "How old are you?" he asked. 9. 9. 9 meant Simone had left carrying more than her coat and her careful principles. 9 meant she had walked out of his life already holding something that was also his. 9 meant that for every year Kaspar had spent building a city that feared him. Somewhere a girl with his blood had been learning how to button her own coat, pack her own lunch, navigate a world. Simone had tried to keep clean. He made himself look at the envelope again. "Did your mother send you here?" Phoebe's expression shifted by the smallest degree. The chin lifted a little more. "She didn't send me anywhere," she said. "She died 11 days ago." The office did not change. The light stayed the same. Traffic moved outside the window. Kaspar set down his pen. "What happened?" Phoebe looked at the floor for exactly 2 seconds, then back at him, her heart. She knew for a while. A pause. She didn't tell me how long she knew. He understood then why the envelope existed, why Simone had written his name in ink that pressed through the paper. She had been preparing this long before Phoebe needed to use it. "She left you alone. I was with our neighbor, Mrs. Fontaine. She's nice, but she has a bad hip and she cried every time she looked at me, so I think it was hard for her." Phoebe reached into the pocket of the raincoat and produced a second, smaller envelope, this one sealed with tape at every edge. "Mom said to give you this one only after you read the first one." Kaspar picked up the first envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. Him and Simone outside a cafe on Rue Saint-Denis, early autumn, the kind of day that felt borrowed from summer. She had taken it with her phone held at arm's length, and he had told her it was an undignified way to document anything, and she had told him dignity was a performance for people with too much time. In the photograph he was not quite smiling, but his face was open in a way it never was when she was not in the room. He turned it over. On the back in Simone's handwriting. "If something happens, Veld, she has his eyes." He read it twice. "Did she tell you who I am?" he said. "She said you were important." Phoebe considered this. She said important people sometimes confused it with being powerful, and they weren't the same thing. Kaspar set the photograph on the desk. "She said that about me specifically. She said it in general, but she looked at your picture when she said it." He almost said something. The impulse rose and he let it pass. He stood instead because standing was easier than continuing to sit while a 9-year-old told him things that rearranged the last decade. "Are you hungry?" he said. Phoebe looked at him like she was deciding whether the question was a trap. "Yes." He pressed the intercom. His assistant answered in under a second. "Get food, something warm, soup, bread, juice, not coffee." A pause. "No, don't ask, just bring it." He pulled the chair closest to the desk out from the table and pushed it a foot in her direction. not close. Far enough that she could reach it without feeling cornered. Phoebe sat on the edge of it. The yellow raincoat was too big, something she had grown into rather than out of. "Where did you come from today?" he asked. "Rosemont, Mom's apartment." She folded her hands in her lap. Her nails were bitten short. Pain. There was a hospital bracelet still on her right wrist, paper, soft at the edges. "A woman came from Child Services," Mrs. Fontaine called her. "The woman said there were forms and timelines and that I would probably need to go somewhere, temporary while things got sorted. What kind of somewhere?" She didn't say exactly. Phoebe looked at the intercom on his desk, then back at him. "I left before she came back with the forms." Kaspar looked at her. Pain. "You left. Mom told me to find you if anything happened. She said to find you first, before anyone else made decisions." A pause. "So I found you first." He felt something move in his chest that had no business moving. He had built significant defenses against most things. He had not thought to build one against this, a 9-year-old who had carried out her mother's last instructions with more precision than half the men on his payroll. The food arrived after a knock. Rain. Kaspar collected the tray at the door himself, which made his assistant glance past his shoulder with carefully practiced blindness. He placed the bowl in front of Phoebe. Tomato soup, thick bread, a glass of apple juice. She looked at it with the expression of someone who did not want to appear too grateful. He said, "Eat." She ate quickly, tearing the bread into pieces and soaking each one before eating it. She kept her eyes down while she did this. Pain. Kaspar had seen that kind of hunger before, not physical exactly, but the hunger of someone who had been managing their own needs for longer than they should have had to. When the bowl was half empty, she slowed. "Is there somewhere I'm supposed to go tonight?" she asked. Kaspar's jaw tightened. "No." She looked at him. "Do you mean not yet? Or do you mean no?" "I mean no." She absorbed this. Her fingers pressed flat against the edge of the bowl. Pain. "You don't know me. I know enough. Mom said you might not want." She stopped, started again. "She said you might not have room." He understood what Simone had done. She had prepared Phoebe for rejection so that rejection would not destroy her. She had made the worst possibility survivable before it arrived. He could hear Simone's voice doing it. Careful, quiet, making hard things into something a child could hold without cutting herself. Pain. He looked at the girl with the bitten nails and the hospital bracelet and the yellow coat with the broken zipper. "She was wrong about that," he said. Phoebe stared into the soup. Her face did not change, but her shoulders dropped by one small degree. They left through the back of the building his head of security, a man named Bryce, who had worked for him for 11 years and learned to communicate entire conversations with eyebrow movements, met them in the parking garage. His gaze moved to Phoebe once, then to Kaspar, and he said nothing. Kaspar said, "Car," Bryce said, "already." They drove north through Montreal in a black Suburban that had been modified in ways that were not visible from the outside. Phoebe sat beside Kaspar in the back and watched the city through the window. Rain was just starting. It blurred the streetlights into long oranges. After several blocks, she said, "Are you actually my father?" Kaspar looked at her. "Mom didn't say it exactly," Phoebe said. "She said find him and she gave me your picture and she put something about eyes in the envelope, but she never said the actual word." He was quiet for a moment, not because he was deciding, but because the word itself took up more space than he expected. "Yes," he said. Phoebe nodded. "Once, like she was filing it. Does that change something for you?" he asked. She looked out at the rain. "It changes what I call you, eventually. Rain, I don't know what yet." A pause. "Is that okay?" "Yes," he said. "Take whatever time you need." She nodded again and went back to watching the city. His house was in Outremont. Old stone, narrow street, 3 stories behind iron fencing that looked like architecture but wasn't only architecture. Inside, it smelled of wood and cold air, and something Kaspar had never been able to name. Phoebe stepped through the front door and looked up at the ceilings. High, dark staircase. Not many lights on. "It's very quiet," she said. "Yes." "Do you live here alone?" "Yes." She looked at the walls. No photographs, no drawings, no mess. Everything placed with the precision of someone who had arranged a life for functionality rather than comfort. "My mom's apartment was small," she said, "but there were things everywhere. Plants, books. She had a corkboard in the kitchen with notes on it." She paused. It felt like someone lived there. He had nothing to say to that, because it was accurate. He showed her to the guest room on the 2nd floor. White walls, white bedding, a lamp, a window overlooking the garden below. "This is yours," he said. She touched the edge of the blanket. "For how long?" He remembered what she had said in the car. He answered without the qualifier this time. "It's yours." She looked at him. Her expression was cautious in the specific way of children who had learned that adults changed the terms without warning. "You don't know me either," she said. "Rain, you should probably know that before you say things like that." "I'm saying it anyway." She was quiet then. "There's a bathroom? Through that door." "Okay." She sat on the edge of the bed. The yellow coat was still on. She hadn't taken it off since she arrived. "Can I keep the light on in the hall?" "Yes." She nodded. He moved toward the door. "Mr. Veld." He turned. She had her hands in her lap. Her face was steady, but her voice was slightly smaller than it had been all evening. "Rain, was my mom happy before?" He could have said many things. He could have made it simple and clean. He chose the truth instead because Phoebe had her mother's eyes and Simone had always known when she was being given a softened version. "She was the happiest thing in my life," he said, "for about 14 months. Then she left and I didn't find her, and I don't know what came after that." Phoebe was quiet for a moment. She had hard years, she said, but she laughed a lot. "Rain, she was good at finding things funny even when they weren't, really." A pause. "I think that's worth knowing." He stood in the doorway for a moment before he trusted himself to speak. "Good night, Phoebe." "Good night," she said. And then, quietly, before he pulled the door almost closed, "I'm glad she wrote your name down." He left the hall light on. Rain. Downstairs, Bryce was waiting in the kitchen with a folder and the expression of a man who had too many questions and enough professionalism to ask only the necessary ones. "I need everything on Simone Calloway," Kaspar said before Bryce could speak. "Last address, medical records, death certificate. What hospital? What doctor? Who was notified? Who was not? Any lawyer? Any papers? And I need a family attorney tonight." Bryce said, "Which one?" "Isabeau Marchand." "Rain. She'll answer." Bryce was already dialing when Kaspar walked to the window. The rain had come in fully now. It ran down the glass in thin tracks. He stood there until Bryce handed him the phone. Marchand answered on the second ring. Her voice was sharp with interrupted sleep, and she did not pretend otherwise. "Kaspar, what time is it? I need emergency guardianship papers for a minor, 9 years old, mother deceased, no immediate family located." A pause. "Rain, are you related to the child?" He looked toward the ceiling, toward the room where Phoebe was. "Yes, I'm going to need documentation." "You'll have it. This is going to take, I know what it's going to take. Start tonight." She exhaled. "You're going to owe me considerably. Bill it." She hung up. He handed the phone back to Bryce, who looked at him with the measured expression of a man absorbing significant information without commentary. "She saw you," Bryce said. "Rain." Kaspar looked at him. "Who? The Fontaine woman's neighbor? Coming out of the building on Rosemont when you pulled up, she knows the car." Kaspar said nothing. "I don't know who she tells," Bryce said, "but you should know someone saw her come in with you." Kaspar walked to the kitchen table and sat down. The folder Bryce had started to compile was there, thin so far, but it would fill by morning. Men who worked for him moved quickly when the order was genuine. "Rain, does anyone know why she came to me?" he said. "Not yet. Keep it that way." Bryce's jaw shifted. For how long? Realistically, long enough. Kaspar opened the folder. The first page was bare. Just Simone's name and the address in Rosemont, the date of death, the name of the hospital. He looked at the date. 11 days. For 11 days he had attended meetings, reviewed contracts, made decisions that moved money through the city like dark water, slept badly, woken before 5. Rain. For 11 days, Simone Calloway had been gone from the world and he had felt nothing, known nothing, because he had stopped looking 8 years ago and told himself it was for the right reason. He closed the folder. "She left a second envelope," he said, "sealed. For me." Phoebe said to give it after I'd read the first. Bryce set it on the table without asking where he had gotten it from. Kaspar did not open it that night. Rain. He put it in his coat pocket and went to bed at 2 in the morning and lay in the dark until 4, when the security monitor showed a small shape moving on the second floor. Phoebe's door opening. Phoebe stepping into the hallway. She sat at the top of the stairs, not crying, not calling for anyone, just sitting with her knees drawn up, looking down into the dark house, doing what children did when grief was too large for sleep. He watched the monitor for 20 minutes. Rain. Then she went back to her room. The next night it happened again. This time he went to the linen closet and found a fleece blanket, soft, dark blue. He placed it at the top of the stairs before midnight. In the morning, the blanket was folded neatly on the bottom step. Phoebe said nothing about it at breakfast. He said nothing either. The third night, he placed it before she came out. Rain. She appeared at 12:40, wrapped herself in it without hesitation, and sat for 30 minutes before going back to bed. Kaspar watched the monitor and kept his hand pressed flat on the desk. By the fourth night, the blanket was simply there, a small signal between them that neither had named. I know you can't sleep. I'm not going to make you explain it. The morning she started school was cold and clear. Kaspar drove her himself, which surprised Bryce enough that he said so. You have the harbor meeting at 9. Move it. Bryce looked at him, moved it. The school was in Outremont, a private institution with good French and better English, and a head of admissions who owed a favor to a lawyer who owed a favor to Marchand. Phoebe sat in the office chair with her hands in her lap and answered questions in a clear voice, and looked at the window when she needed a moment. On the way back, she was quiet. Did you not like it? Kaspar said. It was fine. She watched the bare trees on Côte Sainte Catherine. What if someone asks about my family? He kept his eyes on the road. I don't know yet. A pause. What are you? Exactly, to me. He let the question breathe for a moment. Whatever you decide. She turned from the window and looked at him directly. That doesn't really help. No, he said. I suppose it doesn't. He took a turn. I'm your father. That's the accurate thing. What you do with it is yours to decide. Phoebe was quiet for the rest of the drive. He didn't push. At home she changed out of her school clothes and came back to the kitchen in leggings and a gray sweater with a small star near the collar. He noticed her shoes by the door. The left one had been pressed against something that morning. A small red mark on her heel. He called Marchand that afternoon. What does a 9-year-old need for school in terms of supplies? Marchand made a sound that was halfway between laughing and something else entirely. Are you serious? If I weren't serious, I wouldn't be calling, she told him. He wrote it down. By the time Phoebe came home the following afternoon, 2 bags had arrived from a children's shop on Laurier, school bag. She chose her own from the options he presented, a green one with a small fox on the front, binders, notebooks, pencils. A lunch bag she held by the handle for a long time before setting it down. All this is for me, she said. Yes, why? He crouched in front of her the way he had started learning to do, lower his own height, make the conversation level. Because you need things. Phoebe looked at the bags. Mom used to say that needing things is how people get hurt. He looked at her small face, at Simone's eyes, and Simone's jaw, and something around the mouth that was entirely Phoebe's own. Your mother was protecting you from a world I was part of. She wasn't wrong to do it. He paused. But you're here now, and here needing things is allowed. She thought about that with the seriousness she gave most things. Then she picked up the green bag and tried it on over both shoulders. It was slightly too large. She adjusted the straps herself without asking for help, which told him something. That evening, Bryce came by with papers. Guardianship petition, school authorization, medical consent. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen when he saw it. Phoebe had drawn something and taped it to the refrigerator with a piece of Scotch tape she had found in a drawer. It was a house with 2 windows and a door and a tree beside it. 2 figures outside, one tall, one small. The tall one had dark hair. The small one wore yellow. Bryce's face changed. Kaspar said. Don't, Bryce said. I wasn't going to say anything. Phoebe appeared from behind him with a red pencil in her hand. You can look at it, she said. Bryce studied it with the careful respect of a man who had learned when something mattered. The tree is good, he said. Phoebe seemed to accept this. She went back to the table and kept drawing. Bryce lowered his voice. She's changing the house already. Kaspar watched her from the doorway. She had her tongue between her teeth, concentrating on something in the corner of a new page. No, he said quietly. She's showing me what wasn't here. He signed the papers. Each one felt less like a transaction and more like something he owed. When it was done, he capped the pen and looked at his name in ink. Kaspar Veld. It had meant specific things in this city for a long time. Now it sat above a 9-year-old girl's name on a document that said he was responsible for her. Not in money, not in blood alone. In breakfast, in blankets at the top of stairs. In the green bag with the fox on the front, he had not opened Simone's letter. He opened it the night Phoebe came to find him in the study at 1 in the morning, not because she couldn't sleep, but because she had been downstairs for water and seen the light under the door and knocked. He said, "Come in." She pushed the door open and looked around. Books, maps, files, a desk that took up too much of the room. A whiskey glass he hadn't touched. The sealed envelope in the center of the desk where he'd placed it 3 days ago and not moved it since. "You haven't read it," she said. He looked at her. "How do you know?" Mom used to do that too. Put things down and look at them for days before she could open them. She came to the nearest chair and climbed into it, pulling her feet up underneath her. She said it was because she could control what she hadn't read yet. He picked up the envelope, opened it. The letter was written on 2 pages in Simone's hand. The ink was slightly uneven in places. Written, he understood, when she was already tired, when the effort of pressing the pen required more than it once had. Kaspar, if you're reading this, then Phoebe was brave enough to do what I asked. I knew she would be. She has been braver than I deserved for most of her life, and some of that is your fault because she got her stubbornness from somewhere, and it wasn't from me. I'm not going to apologize for leaving. I've written that sentence 6 times now and deleted it every time, because apologizing implies I would have done differently, and I don't know that I would have. I was pregnant and I was frightened, and the thing I was most frightened of was not you. You should know that. I was frightened of what loving you might cost her before she had a chance to become herself. You would have loved her. That was never the question. The question was whether love was enough, and I didn't know the answer, and I was too proud to ask you, and by the time I knew I was running out of time to ask anything, it felt cruel to show up at your door and say, "Here is everything I chose to carry alone, and also I'm dying." So I gave it to Phoebe instead, which was probably also cruel, in a different direction. She likes birds. She draws constantly. She asks questions I can't always answer, and then finds ways to be okay with the ones I get wrong. She keeps a notebook of things she wants to know eventually. She is the best thing I ever did, and I did it mostly alone, and some days that felt like strength, and some days it felt like stubbornness that cost us both too much. Don't love her like something the world owes you. Don't protect her so tightly she can't breathe. Don't make her pay for the years I kept her from you. There is a man under whatever you've built on top of yourself, Kaspar. I met him once in a hospital corridor when you stayed in a room you had no reason to stay in. Find him again. Start with her. Simone. Kaspar held the pages for a long time. Phoebe had fallen asleep in the chair. Her head was tilted sideways, her breathing slow. He folded the letter carefully along its original creases and held it for a moment before setting it in his inner pocket. He drove to Rosemont the following afternoon. Alone, no Bryce, no car that knew the city's angles too well. A rental that looked like nothing. The cemetery was in the East End, behind a stone church on a street that had changed considerably around it without changing itself at all. Snow had come overnight and it had not been cleared from the smaller paths yet. Simone's grave was recent. The stone plain, the ground not yet settled. Simone Claire Calloway, 1990 to 2026. She made the small things matter. He stood there for a long time, long enough that the cold moved through his coat. He had prepared things to say. Organized, clear, the way he organized most things, but standing in front of the stone in the snow with the city moving distantly beyond the cemetery gate, the organization left him and what remained was simpler. I didn't look long enough, he said. The wind moved through the bare branches. Nothing answered. That was accurate. I told myself you had chosen to be free. I told myself stopping was respect. I think I stopped because part of me was afraid of what I would find if I kept looking. That you had built something without me because you needed to, and I didn't want to see what that looked like. He paused. I was right to be afraid. What you built is extraordinary. I don't know whether to be grateful or ashamed that I had nothing to do with it. He knelt. The snow soaked through his trousers at the knee. She asks questions I don't know the answer to, and waits with total patience while I look for them. She folded the blanket I left her every morning for 4 days without ever mentioning it. She drew us on the refrigerator before I'd said a single thing to deserve being in the picture. His voice thinned. She is very much like you. You should know that somewhere. He pressed his hand flat against the top of the stone. When he stood, he noticed a small waterproof pouch pushed against the base of the stone, half covered by new snow. Clear plastic. His name on the front, in Simone's handwriting, different from the letter, smaller, slightly less steady. In case you come. He took it with him. Inside was a single photograph, Phoebe at about age 4, sitting on a kitchen floor with a notebook in her lap. She was drawing something. She had not noticed the camera. She was completely absorbed in the page, and her face in that moment was the most unguarded thing he had ever seen. On the back of the photograph, in ink that had faded slightly, she already knows how to make a house a home. She just needs somewhere to do it. He sat in the rental car with the photograph in both hands for a long time before he started the engine. When he returned, Phoebe was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea Bryce had apparently helped her make. She looked up when he came in. Her eyes went to the snow still on his shoulders. You went somewhere, she said, to see your mother. She put the cup down very carefully. Her grave? Yes. A pause. The heater clicked on somewhere in the walls. Was it hard? Yes, she nodded, like that was the correct answer. Then, can I come next time? He sat across from her at the kitchen table. The kitchen that had started to have things in it now. Her green bag by the back door, a drawing of a bird taped to the window frame, 3 library books stacked by the fruit bowl. Yes, he said. Promise, promise. She looked at him for a long moment with Simone's eyes. Then she picked up her tea again. Dr. Ellison says I can call people what feels true, she said. She was looking at the cup. She's the one I talk to on Thursdays. I know, she said name should match what's real, not what's official. He kept still. Phoebe's finger traced the rim of the cup. I've been thinking about what to call you. She glanced up, then back down. Mr. Veld feels like a teacher. Kaspar feels like someone Mom knew. A pause. I was thinking maybe something else. The kitchen was very quiet. I was thinking maybe Dad, she said. If you want. He had signed contracts that moved millions of dollars. He had sat across from men who wanted him ruined and held the room by staying colder than they could. He had built things that required a specific kind of stillness. Nothing had required this particular stillness. Yes, he said, I want that. She nodded. Her eyes were bright, but she held it together in the way she held most things together, with the quiet discipline of someone who had been doing it alone for too long. Okay, she said. Okay, Dad. From the hallway, Bryce made a sound that might have been a cough or something else. Kaspar did not look at him. 2 weeks later, Bryce found him in the study before sunrise with his phone face up on the desk, 3 missed calls from the same number. Soren Holt, Bryce said. He's been asking about the house, about the school run, about why the schedule changed. Kaspar leaned back. Soren Holt ran a financial operation out of the old port that had been bumping against Kaspar's edges for months with the particular confidence of a man who had not yet been corrected. He was ambitious in the way that came from never having lost anything significant. He had been a minor annoyance. Kaspar had let him remain one because the correction would take effort, and effort had seemed disproportionate. Disproportionate. What does he know? Kaspar said. Enough to ask the questions, not enough to know what they mean yet. Bryce's expression was careful. One of the crew from Rosemont talked, not Dara, someone lower. They saw the car, they made the connection. Which connection? That there's a child. That she came to you specifically. A pause. Holt is smart enough to know that's leverage if it's what it looks like. Kaspar stood and walked to the window. The city was barely light. Street lamps still on. A delivery truck moving slowly down the empty street. He thought of the photograph on the refrigerator, the blue blanket at the top of the stairs. The sound of Phoebe's voice saying, Dad for the first time in the kitchen, over a cup of tea, like it was simply the right word for the right person. What does he want? Kaspar said. Territory. The Verdun account. Probably a conversation where you treat him like an equal. He's not. No. Bryce paused. How do you want to handle it? Kaspar turned from the window. There was a version of him, the version that had made the name Veld mean something specific in certain rooms, that knew exactly how to handle Soren Holt. Fast, definitive, the kind of message that required no translation. Phoebe was asleep upstairs. She had started sleeping through the nights more often. The blanket still came out, but less. 2 nights ago she had made it until 5 in the morning before coming to sit at the top of the stairs, and when Kaspar had appeared at the bottom with a glass of water, she had looked at him with an expression that was almost nearly something like peace. He thought of the line in Simone's letter, don't protect her so tightly she can't breathe. He thought of Phoebe on the porch last Saturday, the way she had stood beside him while he was on a call he couldn't avoid, and when he finished she had said simply, birds are easier than people. They don't lie about where they're going. He had no idea what to do with how much he loved that child. Clean, he said to Bryce. We do it clean. Bryce waited. His financing runs through 3 shell accounts on Saint Laurent. 2 of them have exposure. I want that exposure on the right desk by Monday. Kaspar reached for his phone. I also want whoever talked in Rosemont identified by end of day, not punished. Relocated. There's a difference. Bryce's expression shifted. That last distinction was news. Understood, he said. The meeting with Holt happened 4 days later in a restaurant on McGill College that Kaspar owed through 2 degrees of separation. He arrived first. He chose the table, which is how such things work. Holt came in with 2 men and the comfortable smile of someone who had been told he was charming often enough to believe it. He was younger than Kaspar by a decade, well-dressed, too much watch. He sat down across the table and spread his hands. Kaspar Veld. He said it like a toast. I was starting to wonder if you'd moved to a quieter life. Kaspar looked at him. Holt's smile held. Word is, things have changed in Outremont. Things are always changing, Kaspar said. That's not interesting. New factors are interesting. Holt tilted his head. especially when they're personal. The restaurant was quiet around them. Kaspar had ensured that. Bryce was at the bar. The exit was a known distance behind Holt's left shoulder. "You've been looking at my house," Kaspar said. "My school run, my schedule. Gathering information is costly," Kaspar said. "What you paid for it is going to seem like the reasonable part of the bill in about 48 hours when the accounts on Saint Laurent get the attention they've been avoiding." He paused. "And the man who sold you information about my household is in Laval right now, which is not where he was on Thursday." Holt's smile stayed, but it changed quality. "You have two options," Kaspar said. "You can leave Montreal on good terms. Your operation stays intact, your people stay employed, and this conversation becomes the smartest thing you've ever done." He leaned forward slightly. "Or you can make me come back to this table." A silence. "I have a daughter," Kaspar said. His voice dropped, not with anger but with something quieter and more final. "She is 9 years old. She has been through enough. I will not be reasonable about that." Holt looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and stood. "I'll be in touch about the transition," he said. "You'll be in touch with Bryce," Kaspar said. "I won't need to be involved." Holt left. His men followed. The restaurant exhaled. Bryce appeared at the table a moment later. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. Kaspar was home by 8. The house was lit in the kitchen and on the second floor. Through the window he could see the yellow light of Phoebe's room, the color she had chosen on a Saturday in a hardware store on Laurier, standing in the paint aisle with total seriousness, holding cards up to the light like she was judging a trial. She had chosen morning light. He had painted it badly. She had corrected his tape lines without being asked. He had spilled some on the drop cloth, and she had gotten some on her elbow, and when he had gotten a long streak across his wrist, she had looked at it and started laughing. Not politely, not carefully, but the real kind that took over her whole body and made her sit down on the floor with her hand over her mouth. He had stood in the middle of the yellow room holding a paint roller, watching his daughter laugh, and felt the fortress shift around him. Not collapse. Kaspar Veld's fortress was not going to collapse, but rooms were opening inside it that had been sealed for a long time. He came in through the front door. Phoebe appeared at the top of the stairs before he had his coat off. "You said you'd be back," she said. "I said I'd be back. By 8. It's 8. She came down the stairs in her socks. The blue blanket was over her shoulders even though it wasn't nighttime. She had started wearing it like a cape in the evenings, which Bryce had observed with an expression of helpless warmth. "Was it bad?" she asked. He thought about what to tell her. He thought about Simone's letter. "Don't make her pay for the years I kept her from you." "It was necessary," he said. "It's done now." She looked at him with her mother's directness. "Did you come back the same?" It was such a specific question. He did not know if she knew why she asked it, or if it had simply risen out of her, the way true things rose out of people when they were not trying to be careful. "No," he said. "I think I came back different." She absorbed this. Then she moved toward him, not running, not rushing, but direct, and she put her arms around his waist and pressed her face into his coat, the way she had started doing when something mattered enough to override the caution she carried everywhere. He put his arms around her. "Good," she said, into his coat. "Different is okay as long as you come back." He looked over her head at the kitchen wall, at the refrigerator, at the drawing she had taped there on her 3rd day in this house, the 2 figures outside the house with the crooked door, one tall, one small. Beside it now was a second drawing, same house. This time there was light in the windows. The tree had leaves. He held his daughter in the hallway of a house that had started slowly, improbably, to become home. Outside, Montreal moved through the night, cold and bright and entirely itself. Men made their calculations. Money shifted. The city kept its own counsel the way cities always did. Inside, Kaspar stayed very still so Phoebe would not think she had to let go. On the refrigerator, beside the drawing with the light in the windows, there was a small sticky note Bryce had found on the kitchen counter that morning and had not mentioned to anyone. In Phoebe's handwriting, in purple pen, 4 words she had apparently written and left there without comment, the way she did most of the things that mattered. "We live here now."